decided to try my hand, 15 years ago with fiction. Somebody said they liked it, so I kept doing it.
I forgot, we should have ended with him. Yeah, his list goes well. So. I'm Eric Butler. Indie horror is what I say, but it leans towards the extreme. Extreme is kind of getting a bad rap right now, so I try to preference it. I don't do gross out horror, I do extreme horror. So there's a difference, just like if you wanted to go to splatterpunk, there's a difference there too. But we don't need to get into that. So I started in 2019, and I have a couple different series, and I'm from the Fort Worth area. So.
My name's Andrew Alonzo, and I started out writing screenplays many, many years ago. And then when I realized how terrible it was to write for film, I decided to try my hand at novel writing, and been loving it ever since. And I like long walks on the beach, and that kind of stuff. And now it's your turn. So
I'm Chad Nicholas. I started writing in 2019, which is also when I started going to college for a mechanical engineering degree. I finally graduated this past spring, which was fun. So excited to be done with that. And yeah, I've written 3 novels: Nightmare, Shade, and Animal, and I'm working on a few more right now.
I'm Merrill David. I live in the Murphy area. I started writing probably about 2019 as well. Published my first self-published book, was Wicked Awake. It's a zombie book. I intended it to be just a standalone. Next thing you know, I've written 5 of those. So that series is over, and now I'm kind of writing splatterpunk horror as well. I'm having a good time doing that. So that's all I do.
Does anyone have any questions for them?
Can you tell me what splatterpunk horror is? I'm sorry.
You want me to do it?
You go ahead.
I was in St. Louis at a book thing, and I was actually on the extreme splatterpunk panel. So basically, splatterpunk is extreme horror, but it's extreme horror with a little bit of twist. It leans into the punk, and the punk is to comment on social or some sort of situation that might be needing a light shined on it in a way that the horror writer does. So.
Similar to, I'm sorry, I was saying it's similar to the extreme, but there is a slight.
Yeah, there's a big difference. Extreme is extreme, kind of just to be extreme. Splatterpunk has usually got a message it's trying to convey. They may have, sometimes it's real subtle, and then sometimes it's right in your face. But both of those are going to have extreme elements. And extreme elements and violence, over the top nature of situations and stuff like that. But if you are a splatterpunk writer, you're usually trying, or you're always trying to convey some sort of message that deals with something going on in that time period.
Thank you.
All right. So we've got some latecomers here. So let me ask you folks a question. Did you always want to be a writer, or is this just something you fell into?
Someone told me at a very young age that I had a talent, and when I say young age, we're talking mid-80s. And if you were a writer in the mid-80s, that meant you were a nerd, and that was not a good thing in the mid-80s, because all our music told us to have like long hair and live in Southern California. So when they approached me to write, I refused. But it's something that I kind of did privately for fun, and it wasn't until I got in my early 30s that I said, I'm going to give this a shot.
Awesome. Eric?
Yeah, I've been a reader from a very young age, and my mom encouraged it. I never thought about publishing. That's a totally different thing. And if I didn't understood that writing and publishing are 2 different animals, I may have thought different about getting into it. But I've been writing forever. Now, my wife is the reason that I do publish. She encouraged me to actually write a novel. I did a lot of short stories, things of that. When I needed a break from reality, I would just hammer out a story for myself. Never shared it or any of that thing. But I've been writing since probably 4 or 5.
Oh, awesome.
To touch on what he was saying, writing is not just something that I've always enjoyed doing, but it is very cathartic. And so if you can channel that into something that other people can also enjoy, then you might as well just dive straight into it and just keep doing it as best you can, right? But I love creating anything really, but creating worlds, especially like writing entire worlds without having to worry about how do you say, your brains are the canvas, and I'm just kind of like throwing paint at it, and then like whatever you make stick is what sticks, is kind of how I explain it.
I'm kind of similar. I never probably seriously considered like writing as even an option until about 2017, which is 2 years before I wrote Nightmare. But it was a case of even before I thought of writing as an option, I've always loved films, always loved books, comics, everything that I could watch, and I always just really would like watch a movie and trying to figure out why the movie worked, why did the characters do this, how is it structured, all that kind of stuff. And the writing unfolded out of, I enjoyed that so much, I was like, well, I want to actually learn how to do it, and eventually I decided to go ahead and start writing to test it out.
I kind of started kind of like a couple of these guys through my wife, kind of I don't want to say instigating, but it was kind of more of a dare. You know, I used to really be into The Walking Dead and the zombie shows, and I would always kind of critique them. I'd be like, oh, those zombies are way too fast. Everyone knows the real zombies are slow. And she'd be like, why don't you write a book? And I said, I don't know. So it was kind of a dare, kind of a challenge, and I started to write a book, and it took me a long. That was probably about 2016. It took me a few years to write it. Like I said, that's the one that I published in 2020. But that's how it started. But then I just enjoyed it so much that I just kind of kept going with it. So and like Andrew said, it's kind of therapeutic at times when you're having down times and bad days. I mean, you can jump on the keyboard, kind of like the keyboard warrior. But
Take your day out on it.
Yeah. So it's very therapeutic and entertaining at the same time for me. So.
So, go ahead. No, you go right ahead.
Do y'all plan out multiple books to start with, or do you start a book and say, okay, I can bridge off from this?
Do you want to start?
I just start with the one, and as I write the one, I start thinking of storylines that I eventually axe but couldn't work for a sequel. I mean, Jurassic Park did it for an entire series.
Right.
So I start with one, and then if I see that there's enough left over, then I might use that to sequel.
I'm a pantser, so no, I don't plan anything. So you got plotters, you got pantsers. Plotters will sit down and get everything plotted out, and they'll probably plot out series. I have friends that have 15, 16 books plotted out, you know, everything. Pantser sits down and writes about the seat of her pants. So I have an idea. Even when I do plot out, I usually end up throwing that away within like 5 minutes, and I just go. If I'm lucky, and at the end I see, oh, this is a pretty cool idea, I'll continue. Don Texas is kind of like that. That's probably the only one I ever thought this might be a series after I read the first one. But yeah, that's usually just, we'll see how it goes.
What he just said about being a plotter or a pantser, that's kind of like how I approach my writing, with an exception. Like I kind of call what I do like being a stenographer, essentially. So I put my characters in a scenario, and what they do is what they do. But if you kind of have a bird's eye view, you can see where they're going to go. And if you kind of have an idea of where the story is going to take them, then you can kind of sit down and comfortably maybe try and plot out something that'll happen in the future, and then just pray that they agree with you. But it doesn't always work out. But in some instances, yeah, you can try to create like, okay, so I want this to happen in the next one, and then I want this to happen in the next one, and then something in this one will, and it's like, oh, okay, well, that's that. Okay, killed it. So it really just depends on the story.
Yeah, I'm very much a plotter. I plot everything. When I'm gonna write a book, I have notes written down of this is what it's gonna be. I then outline it chapter by chapter on a big whiteboard, and then before I write the chapter, I have another notebook that I write scene by scene.
My question, like, who does a murder board when they're doing this?
that is 100% me. And so, in that same vein, because I like to outline so much ahead of time and structure everything, I've found whenever I have sequels or series planned, not always, because sometimes one will come up that you weren't expecting, but for the most part, I try to plan that ahead of time. For instance, like Nightmare is a standalone. I knew from the beginning, the way it ends, doesn't really, there's nowhere to go with the sequel. But at the end of, not to give a spoiler, but at the end of Shade, it kind of teases there's going to be another book, and I had the outline, I have the like entire book and like the ending for the sequel planned before I started writing Shade itself, because I wanted to make sure if there's anything I needed to put in, go ahead and put some foreshadowing, and I like to structure everything ahead of time so there are no surprises I have to, and even then, there's like one or two characterizations, and like, I could do that a little bit differently now that I know a little bit more about the sequel, but I like to do as much ahead of time as physically possible.
And I kind of started that way with my first couple books. I was real good about taking notes, and I was real planned about how I was going to approach those two. And then after a while, I was starting to get a little not that I don't like writing zombies, because I do, but I got a little tired of writing the zombies. So I started to feel like I wanted to kind of expand and do something else to kind of keep. I didn't want it to start feeling like it was getting stale, you know. So I wanted to. I feel like I have to be writing and having a good time while I'm writing for it to come across to the reader like I'm really having a good time with it. So that's why after about two or three of those, Wick and Wake, and I started to feel like I'm going to start writing some of this splatterpunk, and then start having a good time with that. So now I kind of bounce back and forth. So I've got about 15 Google Docs with story ideas, different book ideas, and kind of now the way I do it is whatever looks like it's going to be the most fun to me, that's my next project. So I kind of bounce around now, but that's kind of the way I'm doing it.
Cool. Thank you.
And for the people that just showed up, you are more than welcome to ask them questions as well. So if you guys have questions, just raise your hand and ask away.
What's the scariest book you've ever read?
The scariest book I've ever read.
Well, that's a tough one.
My immediate answer in my head is something totally different from the immediate answer from my mouth. So I'm going to say the very first Stephen King book I ever read was Salem's Lot. I read it at a very early age, and I saw the made-for-TV film at a very early age, and you guys probably all know the scene I'm talking about. I have not watched the new remake that went straight to streaming for some reason, and that's why. Salem's Lot, to me, Stephen King peaked in Salem's Lot, okay? And I would say, from when I read it as a kid, that was the scariest book. Compared to the little engine that could.
Well, scariest. I don't know if y'all know who Richard Lehman is. Okay, so that's my guy. That's the reason I write the way I write, and I discovered him later. So I want to say the one probably. What is it? Darkness Tells Us was the first one I read by him, and that one certainly unnerved me, and it made me realize the avenues you can go down, and pretty much everything he does will put you on the edge of your seat. Most impactful, though, I just read The Auctioneer. That came out in the 70s, but I just discovered it in Paperbacks from Hell. And that has got the most incredible creeping sensation of dread as you're reading it. And I think it's probably because of my age now reading it. You know, if I read it when I was a teenager, I don't know if it would have had the same impact. But as an adult, it really rocked. It was one of those things where I couldn't put it down because I was so worried about what was going to happen to these characters. I needed to know, and you don't really get that all the time in horror. Sometimes horror is really fun, you know, it's just slash and dash, and you're going through it, and it's, you know, we were raised on 80s horror movies. We're in there for the fast kills and the fun time and stuff. But you get one of those like Auctioneer, The Road by what's his name? Yeah, I think that's a terrifying. I read it at the right time though. My son was the boy's age. I was the father's age. That book wrecked me for a long time. So those are probably the three. I think. But if you're really looking for a good scary thing, something that puts you know, gnash your teeth, Richard Lehman.
Okay, I have to read that.
Lehman.
So my answer is going to be extremely boring because I am so analytical about horror that I want to dissect it more than be affected by it. So I don't really get scared by a lot of things. Not because nothing scares me. It's just I love it. So like I just like want to consume it as opposed to like be affected by it, which may be weird. I don't know. Maybe there's something wrong with me. Your turn.
So my answer will actually be I didn't really get super into horror, especially like horror movies and novels, until right around the time I was about to write Nightmare. But the one book that I read as a child, first scary book I ever read, was on the Great Illustrated Classics version of Jekyll and Hyde. Because I was reading the whole Great Illustrated Classics series that the school library had. I was like, oh, I'll read this one, and that one, as a child, that one really scared me. Now, probably wouldn't be that bad. But yeah, as a kid. Yeah, it is. It was. I like the Illustrated Classics. I've since read the actual version. It's also fantastic. But yeah, as a kid, that one really scared me.
This one, I can't really think of one that stands out that was super scary. I mean, there's a bunch, but I can't. I mean, you guys named some really good ones, so I can't really think of one that stands out to me. So, yeah.
Pet Cemetery.
Pet Cemetery.
That was a good one.
That's a good one. We're gonna go to King.
That can be.
If we're talking which ones we love,
Yeah.
we can name a bunch of
I mean,
those.
The Shining, The Shining's, got a place there. But yeah, Pet Cemetery. In my mind, Pet Cemetery is the most extreme of King's stuff, especially his early stuff. I had a falling out with King after Needful Things, but I haven't read anything after that. But before that, I would classify Pet Cemetery at.
Especially as a parent, you said.
Oh yeah, and that's the funny thing too, is I read most of this stuff as a kid, and I thought it was great and stuff, and I go back
Takes
and
it
I
a
read
whole
it
different dimension.
as an adult, and I'm thinking, oh man,
That one
it
makes
hits
me
you.
sad. Doesn't scare
Oh,
me,
yeah.
but it makes me sad.
It's terrible.
Yeah. It's
I read a
horrible.
lot of serial killer books as a kid too. Those
As I scoot over.
those used to terrify me more than.
Oh yeah,
than, you
yeah.
know.
True crime stuff is terrifying. You go and look back at that stuff. I bet you all of us.
That's
have.
true. That is
I
pretty.
think all of us
horrifying.
probably dipped our toe in that.
The Zodiac, that like mid '80s yellow cover red.
Yeah.
See, that's the problem, right? Like, we were raised with parents that let us watch gratuitous, scary, horrible stuff at a really young age, and so we're
We were
desensitized
inbred
now.
early.
Mine
Yeah.
didn't know until I got sent home from school for having that in school.
Oh, really?
Mine encouraged.
Yeah, I encouraged it with my son for sure. 2 years old, you're watching Aliens, Jaws.
But I'm sure all of us, Jack the Ripper,
Oh,
digging
yeah.
into that. Everybody wants to solve that mystery at a young age, and as you read all this true stuff, and then you discover King and all the other things.
Yeah, definitely.
Is there a particular genre y'all like writing? I know Andrew, you like sci-fi, but creatures, slashers.
I have really gotten into the creature thing, especially since starting. So before that, it was werewolves. I was actually married to Lon Chaney Jr.'s great niece for a little while, and that's why none of the books that I wrote prior to me getting the Splatterpunk are out there for you to purchase, because she had an entertainment lawyer when it was all said and done, and she got awarded 30% for the rest of her life. That happens.
That's a horror story.
Yeah, that's a horror. My divorce.
So if anybody takes anything from
Yes.
me, get a good lawyer.
Yes. Prenuptial agreements and a good lawyer. I mean, we are artists after all. Who knows what's going to come out tomorrow? Who knows if our stuff's going to become famous after we die? Somebody one day might make some money off of it. It would be nice to have that all laid out in paperwork, passed down through the family for when it does.
In my mind, everything is horror. I enjoy writing all of it. I lean towards cryptids, slashers, mayhem, that kind of stuff. But
Hopefully.
yeah, I've got a lot of different things that deal with monsters and cryptids and stuff like that. I've been told that that's kind of my gift or whatever, however you want to word it. That's the thing I do well, and so I like to test the other things as well. Dip my toe into different things. You don't want to get bored doing it, but in my mind, like I said, everything is horror. Any situation, I can find any book in here. If you just twisted it just a little bit, then you got a horror story. So you can just do it.
That's a gift. That is really awesome. But yeah, like you said, you already know, I love to do a lot of science fiction, horror. Creature features are my favorite type of thing to write, or just any sort of like external element that is not that inhuman or like machine-like or unrelenting or terrible. A lot of times, though, like with the new book that's coming out, I'm kind of leaning towards the message being that maybe we're not so great as a species, for the narrative anyway. But as far as the things that I really enjoy writing, I like writing more than just horror, but if I had to pick just for the horror, like, yeah, give me something that's hideous and slimy with a lot of teeth and like a lot of arms and, you know, horrible stuff that, you know, you can only dream up when you're watching, like The Thing or Leviathan or something like that.
For me, I'm similar to a lot of them. I've tried to mix up the genre that I write. I like to alternate between things. Like Nightmare with psychological shade was detective thriller, Animals a slasher. And I found of those, again, I like all horror, of those I really like the noir style detective stuff. Not necessarily like 1950s noir, that kind of hard kind of type thing. I like it because of the intricate mysteries and stuff you can do. And then I think the funnest genre to write so far was slasher. Just because slasher you can have a lot of fun with, but it also, the good slashers still take themselves seriously to a certain extent. So you can have that fun, quick kills, some cool dialogue, the visuals of a slasher with the costume and everything, but still kind of have some extra character work in there. And it was a plus. I have a big background in like comic book fiction, so costumes, all that stuff, action, and that was kind of, I think slasher's kind of where horror meets comics to an extent. So I had some fun with it.
Yeah, I tried to mix it up. I guess I had a lot of zombies stories, and then I've also done a little bit of cryptid. I had a story with a killer yeti up in Nome, Alaska, and then I also did a little sci-fi as well. So I like to mix it up a lot. That's like y'all said. I mean, keeping it new and fun and exciting is. I think it helps your writing, and like I said, if you're having fun, then your readers usually have a good time with it too. So I like to mix it up a lot.
I have a question. Bookseller here. I have a question. Why do we read horror, and why is it so important to us?
Well, we're deep down, we're all animals, and we have animal instincts that the law has says we can't run out in the middle of the streets and do. So to kind of get that, you know, I guess that level of animal off in your brain, sometimes we have to read stuff that we can't quite understand in the beginning. You know, those basic instincts, like, oh yeah, I get it. So, you know, I'm a veteran. I'm ex-military. You know, every now and then I do have a rage streak, so I'll read something. That and video games.
Well, see, I think it's because we kind of, I don't want to say we peaked, but everything that we should be scared of, we're not scared of the way we're set up now.
Yeah.
We're in the society, you know, in the old days, you don't have electricity, so of course everybody's scared of the dark. We have the stories to make sure people do what they need to do so they don't get in these situations, but we don't really have all the same hindrances in life. You know, we can go do whatever we want to do. Most of us don't have to worry about being scared in certain situations, things of that nature, and so it allows us to tap into that, I don't know, that emotional state where maybe it allows us to connect with ancestors or, you know, the past in a way that we can't any other way how we're set up now. You know, everybody knows what it's like to be scared and to go with these situations, and sometimes it's fun to visit them.
He's 100% right. I think it's that primordial part of our brain that's been so suppressed because of society and civilization. You know, we take for granted all the things that we have at our disposal that like make life go smooth and perfectly. So every once in a while, it's like we, on some sort of bizarre genetic level, want to be impacted by something that could like eat us or kill us or chase us. That adrenaline is what we're after. You know, like, I don't know about you guys, but because of the zeitgeist and the way the world is going now, whenever the power goes out, the first thing I think is this an EMP attack? What the hell's going on right now? Are we okay? Is civilization about to crumble? And then, you know, it comes back on, and I'm like, oh, all right.
I'm so glad I'm not a psychopath.
No, it's just but it goes to that instinctual drive that's within us to purge those very animalistic lizard brain parts of our desire to be moved, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with most of that, the concept of horror, because we all, you know, same thing with roller coasters and amusement parks, we all like our heart to race every once in a while, and we hate it while it's happening, but then when it's over, we're like, oh, that was fun, we'll do it again.
Yeah.
And also, to an extent on horror, like it's some of the reason is just the same as we read all the other genres, because horror can have just as good characters, themes, and stuff as everything else, and the fact that it has scary stuff and violence and stuff overshadows that. But you can watch a horror movie just for the character development. If it's a good horror movie, it should have just as good character development as any other genre.
Yeah, it's a rush, like you said, just like an amusement park and a roller coaster ride. It's a rush. For me, anyways, I think for most people, horror is but it's also an escape. It's an escape from real life. You have, and just as much as I was saying, it's an escape for me to write it. I think it's equally as much for readers and for people who watch, scary movies and stuff. You have a bad day at work, and you're like, man, I wish I could kill my boss or whatever. But of course, I'm not going to do that. But let me go find some really, really effed up movie and watch that on TV, and it'll make me feel better. So, not that people would actually think that way, but it's an escape and it's a rush, and that's why I think it'll never go away. People will always love horror.
So how do you handle pacing in horror stories? Do you prefer to slowly build the tension, or is it you immediately plunge into the terror?
It's situational. And I'm working on a short film right now that originally the director wanted it to be like a slow build. It's a 45-minute short film on teenage suicide. And I'm like, that. I know that there's a message behind that, but it is that's a little bit too Saturday morning special. It's like, why don't we shock the crap out of them right in the very beginning, and then take them 6 months prior and lead up to that point. They're not going to get out of the seat. They want to know why the hell this kid's doing this. It's like, oh my God, you're brilliant. How this all works, and how all this works. We're that, but it is situational. I have some books where I have done 5 chapters of nothing but character development, and then the rest of the book is all action. And then I have some where it's a little back and forth.
I'd like to say that you can do whatever you like to do, but you also have to kind of focus on the audience. And audiences today, especially when they want a quick reason to stick with your stuff. So usually I like to punch them in the face right away and let them reel back a little bit, and then we can jump into character development stuff. I do have a couple. I have a Victorian that does have a little bit of a slower build up and stuff. But most readers today, where everybody's trained to TikTok and Reels, and they want everything in little bites. And so that's probably the best thing to do. So you want them to read the whole thing. So grab their attention, and then do your build up so that they can stick with you.
We are in a world of instant gratification right now.
Unfortunately, and every once in a while, though, you'll have a book that doesn't do that. That's so refreshing, and everybody loves it. And then, hopefully, we'll get back towards that again. Right now, everybody wants it now, so you want to grab it right away.
As far as pacing goes, anyway, it really just, like this gentleman was saying, situational. So a lot of times I will start off the opposite. I will start off very slow, building and developing the characters. That way, when I start picking them off, you give a crap that they're dying. And so, like, it's really, I'm sure we all do that, but what I mean is, like, that's how I prefer to do it. Like, stick with the person and like their relationships for a little while, and then like this person's idiosyncrasies.
Yeah, to care for the character.
Yeah. And so, what I do then is I let the pacing kind of like just be dictated by what the creature's doing. At least in the last 2. Yeah, it's not a particularly insightful or entertaining answer, but that's all I got. So, sorry.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of you can kind of have whatever pacing you want so long as you know why you're doing the pacing you're doing.
Yeah.
Certain books
Absolutely.
need to be slow, certain books need to be really fast. Most of the stuff I've written, I tend to go with quicker pacing because that's the type of stuff I enjoy more. I have written Nightmare certainly slower than Animal is. But it's also that sense of, I think sometimes we get confused and think that pacing necessarily means action. Sometimes it's like, to have a quick pace, you have to like be killing someone page 1. There are certain, for instance, we mentioned Zodiac earlier. The film Zodiac doesn't just start off with, it has some kills, like it doesn't just start off with like kill, but it is also one of the most well-paced thriller films you could find, just because every scene it has, something changes. doesn't have to be a kill, something new is just added. And that's kind of the rule I've set for myself of whether it's slow or a fast-paced book, within every chapter, plus my chapters are fairly long, it's a collection of scenes, like within every chapter I try to make sure something has changed. It can just be a new question that's asked or some small thing, but there's just something at the end of this chapter that by the time it's done we didn't know before, and I found that helps the pacing kind of even out somewhat. If you're doing slow or fast, that kind of gives it a pattern for
Yeah,
the
that's a
audience
great
to
point though. I
relate to.
mean, in horror, killing isn't the pace setter. The story is the pace setter. And so when we start fast, we may not be killing anybody. We may introduce you to something or a situation or something that's horrific in that moment, that's very upfront in your face to pull you into the story. But he's 100% correct. You know, that the pacing isn't the killing.
Yeah, with a couple of my long, and it also kind of depends on the length of the book. Like with with my novels, I tend to, start out a little bit slower. You got to put a lot more background in there and world building and such like that. But now I kind of focus more on the short stories, and with those, like you said, a lot of people, their tendency is they've got a very short attention span. So if you don't catch them within the first few pages, they're going to move on to something else. So with the short stories, I kind of have a little pattern that I do. A lot of times I look for 3 main scenes. Like right towards the beginning of my short story, I'll have like a main scene to kind of grab their attention. Then I'll build a little bit of story around the middle of the story. I'll have another big gut punch, and then I have a big final ending. But that's, I think with these shorter stories, you kind of have to grab their attention real quick, or they're going to be gone. So that's kind of the way I've adapted.
You can kind of see that in movies too, because there's a lot of films.
That's
where,
what I
like,
was thinking as you were saying that. Yeah.
It opens up with like a lot of films open up with a flash forward to something that's like towards the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's used really well as like a framing device because you know something different. But then 9 times out of 10, it's only used for the instance of getting you hooked right at the beginning. And that's a case of sometimes it's good, but usually if you're opening up with a flash forward or something like that, usually the best versions are ones that weren't just for the sake of pacing and they have some reason to frame that scene out of context. I think what's dangerous is when sometimes people are just like, they think they have to start with something and the opening of their book doesn't, so they're just like, oh, open with a dream sequence or open with the last chapter at the beginning, and then that can reveal too much, which, I mean, Nightmare opens with a dream sequence, so I'm not one to talk, but you gotta have a reason for the things you do. And I think trying to just force a quick pace is something that hurts a lot of stories.
And my entire werewolf trilogy that will be here shortly is just like that. So if you're not into that, don't come to this side of the table. But as you guys can already see, like the 5 of us, we're all so different. You know, our style. There's some of the things that are alike, but our styles are so different. I've read most of these guys at this stage. A couple of these guys I just met. We're, I guess, just like any other cons that we go to. Every single one you go to, even though we write the same genre. I think that's the cool thing about it.
That's
Especially
indie
in
horror. And that's the point. Everything is horror. So
Were you
that's
in Fright this last time?
No,
Oh,
not
I
there.
thought you were attacked.
Pre-pandemic, right?
So I mean, that's the other cool thing. That's the best thing about horror is that you could have 100 of us up here. We all write something a little different.
Different, yeah.
And everybody has a different style. Everybody has a different favorite subgenre, and you can find something really interesting with everybody you meet in indie horror.
For instance, on that point, I've always found it really fascinating that John Carpenter has been on record several times saying he didn't care for Steven Spielberg's films, which has always been entertaining to me because in the time of like John Carpenter and Spielberg's prime in like the 80s and 90s, they were like the top 2 of their respective genres.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea that Carpenter didn't care for what Spielberg was doing, but respected him, but was like, I don't necessarily care for some of his films, just like J.R.R. Tolkien didn't care for Dune, and they were 2 of the top fantasy sci-fi authors of all time. So that's the thing, like authors, they don't always, but again, Tolkien respected Frank Herbert and all that stuff, but like you can have authors in the exact same genre have 2 completely different styles to the point to where their books aren't compatible with one another, but they're still in the same genre and they still can both do it really well.
There's a million different ways to skin a cat, as they say.
Yeah.
I was saying.
Haven't dressed for that.
Those are called smocks. Aprons, depending on what you're going to do with them.
So, what advice would you give to any aspiring horror writer on how to effectively scare their readers?
Write what scares you. You can watch TV or movies or whatever to see what the flavor of the month is going to be. But write what scares you. I mean, what I'm personally scared of, I run out of things to be scared of over the years. I've been in the military. I collect snakes. You know, I'm running out of. My wife has pet spiders. These are the things that most people are scared of. You know, war, snakes, and spiders, and they're a daily part of my life. I'm scared of abandoned man-made structures on or above water. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Ooh, I feel that.
think back
That's a
to
very specific genre.
TV series It from 1990. The old abandoned waterworks where Pennywise was. Can't watch it. Cannot, and I don't know why. That could be a good question for a psychologist or something. And that's next weekend.
He said it right. What scares you, I guess. You know, I mean, it's hard. Every reader's different too. You know, so that's when I say I write extreme, I always say everybody's level of extreme is different, right? So what I may be considering extreme, somebody's going to read it and think that it's nothing at all, and another person's going to say it's so terrible I can't finish it. So it's the same with what scares people. You know, write a good story. You know, just keep writing, keep putting the work in, and just enjoy what you're doing, and the reader will figure it out. And let them decide. Because, I mean, honestly, when you're writing that book, you're not writing that book for you. And once it's done, you're handing it off. It's for the audience.
Yeah.
So it's for them to decide what's scary, what's not scary, what they like, what they don't like. And you just don't worry about that. What you worry about is that I put out the best thing I could at that point. And then you go to the next project and you start doing it again. And as you do it, you'll get better. And yeah, you'll be able to figure out the jump scares and the things to creep people out. But if you want to write something that's really going to impact people, you can't control that because every person's different. Every person has their own trigger warnings. Every person has their own fear of buildings above water. So you've got to just do what you want to do, tell your story, let the audience decide if it's scary or not.
He's 100% right because, like, if you were really just writing it for yourself and then putting it out, like, it risks becoming self-indulgent. And you know, what if you're not afraid of the same things I'm afraid of? The whole point is to craft a world and a story that is so that part is authentic. And I think something you were kind of touching on this earlier with what you were talking about in terms of how you pace and the story and everything moving forward. I think one of the best ways to really make something scary for other people is to just you just write with some semblance of honesty, you know, like just be real in the moment with what you're trying to convey, even if the subject matter is fantastical or insane or whatever. As long as you approach it from a realistic grounding, even if it's crazy, like I said, you know, whether it's zombies or slashers or whatever, as long as you're really trying to make and craft a world that you could live in, despite how insane it is, you'll probably elicit the kind of reaction that you're hoping to. But certainly, if it was based off of like what we were afraid of, I'd be screwed. So, because like I'm very specific, like with him and water. For me, the only thing that really scares me is anything happening to my son. Like if anything ever happened to my boy, that's the most terrifying thing in the world. And I can't make a whole book about a monster. Well, I mean, I guess you could, but maybe I will in the future. I don't know. But anyway, that's all I got on that one.
Yeah, as far as, I mean, everything they said is correct. So the one thing I would add is figure out what type of horror you're writing and how you want to scare people,
Yeah.
and then really do research into that specifically. For instance, if you're wanting to write a slow burn horror, you might want to research like The Shining and stuff. And if you're want to write a slow burn, serious horror, then studying how Wes Carpenter directed Scream won't really help you. So just really focus on that. For instance, I mean, jump scares get a bad rap just because of the amount of bad jump scares there are in films. But if you want to look at the different examples in the original Poltergeist, the jump scare with the clown is expertly well done, and in the remake, the exact same jump scare is terrible because how they filmed it, how they approached the pacing of the scene. So you could just look at those two individual scenes and learn this is how to do jump scares. And I think studying, I mean, for instance, in Nightmare, I keep looking back at the book I'm talking about, I don't know why. In Nightmare, there's a character that I was like, he's only going to have like 20 pages max of like screen time. I was like, but I need the audience to immediately connect with this character. So I looked into Paul Dini and Alan Burnett. They wrote a lot of episodes of Batman the Animated Series, and they were fantastic writers at crafting a character arc for a 20-minute episode of a children's cartoon. So I did some research into how they wrote some of that stuff, especially like with Mr. Freeze and how they made a sympathetic character in with only like 5 minutes of screen time. So I looked into that in order to write that character in Nightmare, because I was like, they did it well, I can translate that to this. And just really researching the specific things you want to do is always helpful.
I think some of the scariest things a lot of people read are topics that, we were talking about like the true crime earlier, and I think that's a lot of the scariest stuff is not necessarily crime, but things that could actually happen. So even when I'm trying to scare somebody, I'm trying to be real detailed about it being possibly it could really happen. Like I try to, even if I have to rely a little bit on science, sometimes I love Google. I don't know what I would do without Google, but I'll Google stuff and say, hey, a lot of science stuff, is it possible that an octopus could be half human and half female, or stuff like that? And then granted that probably couldn't happen, but I look for weird things that could actually happen. I do a lot of stuff with science, and I see, okay, this has really happened before, and so the reader might be thinking, okay, if that happened before, it could possibly happen again. So I try to always keep them thinking about, I wonder if something like that could really happen. So I think that's what's scary is not just things that are completely out of the realm of possibility, but something that could really happen to you and it has happened before,
Yeah, touch of reality is terrifying.
Right.
Everybody asking.
I
Do
got
you
another one.
believe empathy plays a role
Oh,
in
yeah.
horror,
Oh, definitely.
and how?
No, I was talking to somebody about this the other day because back to this film I'm working on right now. There's a key scene that I need to write, and I sometimes put myself in certain moods to write certain scenes and certain stories, and a lot of that is done through music. And I don't know if you guys just like ever do like deep dives on YouTube, but there's like 8-hour clips of like an Old West themed campfire with I'll put one of those on and put on some headphones and zone out and write an entire chapter. But this scene I'm working on in the film right now, I'm like, I haven't been depressed enough to write this scene because it is going to be one of the most horrendous things I've ever written for anything. And so they're just like, that's not how it works. Especially if it's something like that I know it needs to come across to the reader as something just truly terrible, then I will make sure that I maybe watch a sad movie, maybe watch a violent movie, put on the YouTube stuff, listen to an old Metallica album. Thank God, put that old in front of it. But yeah, definitely. We're all a bunch of psychic sponges anyway. Like, wherever you are and whatever it is you're doing, you're going to go home with that energy on you. So just wash yourself clean of it, put yourself in whatever mood you want, write what you write.
Yeah, I mean, you want the reader to connect with your characters, and so you kind of have to put yourself in that frame of mind and get them there and get yourself there so that it's an impactful story. Characters, the more horrific the stuff you do is going to affect the reader and help and drive that
definitely correct. So, like what I do is I kind of do like what this gentleman does, where I'll listen to music or something, or some sort of noise. A lot of times it's like white noise or something. I don't know why, but it does help with the process. As far as empathy, I believe is absolutely crucial to the writing process. So, like for myself, it helps me in the sense that, so like Stephen King once said that writing is like controlled schizophrenia, and I kind of live by that. So when I'm working on something, he said what did you just say? We're psychic beings? Is that what you said? Yes. Okay. So
I didn't know you guys are going to be fact checked.
So okay. So I kind of agree with that in the sense that, like, when I'm working on a story, I put myself in a position where I'm not actually consciously trying to build my characters. The way that King, and I keep referencing him because it's exactly how I've always thought and how I do things. It's like you're an excavator, right? And you're pulling something out of the ether. And so when it comes to empathy, it's more me as the writer having empathy for what they're doing to me in my story, as opposed to trying to create a empathetic character. They already exist. Our job is to just represent them well. And if we can do that, then we've done our job, is how I look at it. You definitely need to care about them, certainly, because if you don't, the audience will not. But I hope I'm making sense here. It's like, in other words, I don't want the reader to connect or empathize with them because of something that I've written, just what I've represented of them, if that makes sense. Your turn.
I've always looked at it as empathy isn't necessary for horror, but empathy is necessary for extended horror. For instance, you don't need, within the first time you see the monster, if the monster's scary enough, you don't need to care about the characters, but your monster or your horror or whatever it is will never be scarier than it is in the opening pages. And over the course of the book, it will lose that fear factor. So if you don't start to care more about the characters, your book will start to lose the horror. And I found, for instance, in Jaws, the opening scene, we don't really feel that empathetic for Chrissy. We don't know her that well. But the scene of the shark at night dragging her in the water is terrifying, so we're scared. By the end of the book, we've seen the shark 30 times. Not that much, but we've seen it often. Right. But it does such a good job of building up the characters of Brody, like the quiet scenes of him with his son and that kind of stuff, that as the fear of the monster slowly goes down, the empathy for the characters slowly goes up. So it replaces the shock horror with, oh, I hope they don't get killed. It by Stephen King does that really well too, because Pennywise, opening couple chapters is horrifying, but by the end of it, you have seen Pennywise a lot. So by the end, you're not scared by this random clown. You're scared because, oh, he's going to kill Billy and Richie, and we've spent 1,000 pages with them, so that horrifies me. So
trying to figure out what's going on those 10 pages in that one spot. That's what I was thinking.
The 10 pages we all just conveniently skip.
Right.
Which some authors have tried to find ways around that by like evolving the horror creature. Like Alien starts out with, it's just a creepy egg, and then it comes out of the chest. So if you can evolve the monster, you don't need empathy as much. For instance, the first Alien,
but
we like Sigourney Weaver.
No, say you empathize with all those characters by the time the chest burster comes out. So even though they evolve that monster, you are 100% in with
you identify
the entire
with them all, yeah.
We're not even talking about Sigourney Weaver. The entire crew, we all have, we want to see them survive.
For sure.
They didn't even get their bonus.
I know. That's the true horror of that movie.
Right.
I've found that I think some of the best stories out there, not only does the writer have you empathizing for the victims in the stories, but also for the bad person, the suspect, or the creature as well. I mean, you see these stories where there's a person or a monster that is doing god awful things, which would make anybody shudder. But then the story behind why that creature or that person is doing that, and then you actually empathize for them. for the bad person and for this ungodly creature, that's a sign of good writing right there, as far as I'm concerned, and a good story. So it's not just being empathetic with the victims. It's also the suspects and the monsters and the creatures as well. That's how you get a good, well-rounded, complete story, as far as I'm concerned.
100%. When you look at this person and you revile them, but it's like, well, I can kind of understand where it's coming from. It definitely makes it.
So, on to King again, he has, especially in some of his longer novels, if you've read, any number of his books, you'll start to recognize when he starts to tangent off onto something that is not relevant to, and then turn the page. Here we go. Do you find yourselves doing that sometimes and catching yourselves and going back and editing to try to make it tighter, or are you like, that's what it is, this is where that story is, this is part of it, I want you to know that, or do you not regret, but you continue, I'm sure you continue to sit there and self-edit all the way through, do you not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's process to
Yeah.
editing. You're gonna edit it multiple times, and then I hand it to an editor.
Right.
And then she'll come back and say, "What the hell are you doing? What's all this nonsense?" And then I gotta make a point of why that nonsense is important. And we go back and forth. And at the end of the day, if I want to keep it in there, I keep it in there. But she's telling me, "This is nonsense. What are you doing?" So I go back and think about it again. Now King has earned the right to do whatever he wants to do. And if he wants to go on tangents and bore us to tears, he can do that. But I think most of us probably self-edit enough where we can see it.
Right.
And a lot of times you'll write something, you'll put it away, and you'll revisit it, and you'll be like, "Oh, that was the day I ate too many jalapeno poppers, and I just went crazy on whatever." And then you're like, "Okay, I need to refix this. I need to pull this out." Or, "Hey, this is something totally different. This is a new story. This is something its own thing. I don't know why I put it together." Kind of thing. So it just depends. But yeah, usually you would hope.
Find the whole of the story coming out of.
Oh, I've done that. I've written an entire thing and then realized the next time I went over it, I had two different stories and I pulled them apart and then start rewriting both of them, and then you have two things coming out.
I think it's definitely important to know when to yank stuff out, because otherwise, you could be just going into that self-indulgent realm, and then it doesn't serve the story or the person. Like you were saying, like we all have that look. It's like, okay, let's just like I've removed whole chapters from books sometimes just because it's necessary. You like it, but you have to be willing to kill your darlings, and it's all your baby. But at the end of the day, it's that one's a dog.
And I also wanted to say, we've already said some of us are pantsers. That's going to happen more for us than it is going to happen for plotters.
Yeah.
This is
Plotters,
almost something you can say in a bookstore too.
Yeah, this is a gift. This is a great thing he can do. He's got his plot and he's following it, and he's gonna get there quicker than we are. Because sometimes we may go on tangents. As we're doing it, it's a tangent. You're like, "Oh, this doesn't fit what we're doing." Pantsers, when you do it that way, it does add a little bit to the thing, but it also, I guess it's a little freeing too. We tell the characters, we sit down and we say, "Okay, what are y'all doing?"
Basically.
And that's the story.
And sometimes they can be boring, just like a regular human.
Yeah.
And so you got to, and you're really
and stuff.
Yeah.
But if you're a plotter and you have everything, and it sounds like Chad has very well plotted out that he's not going to run into the same situation. Now he may go on many tangents, I would assume, but he is looking at what he should be working on, and it's plotted out to the letter. And I bet you he doesn't run into it as much as maybe we do, as we just slam into walls, thinking, "Oh, this is where I thought we were going. Down the blind alley.
That
now
part,
I need to back up and go back." And
That
do
happens
the right thing.
quite a bit. So one thing I know that definitely helps is having a screenwriting background, because the whole thing is trim the fat, show, don't tell, and so you have no choice but to kind of like just plod through. But every once in a while, you get that.
And I bet Meryl would say the same thing, that when it comes to writing shorter works, when I started, I was always doing long things. And when I started doing the short stories for anthologies and stuff, your word limit forces you to trim the fat.
Yep.
Forces you to
Be
realize,
concise.
"Oh, I was about to do, character speech is so unnecessary." Or nobody needs to know this backstory.
Right.
And so as you start to get better at writing shorter things, it will help your longer things because then you know how to tell a story, timely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, on the comments of plotting, I think it's still a thing of you do still run into the off tangents. They just happen at a different stage. Because when I outline with the big whiteboard for a while, that's a long process. Like I'll take like a month or two of just outlining where I would normally be writing. So they'll be there where I'll just like, oh, I'll have this idea and like I'm gonna do this, and then I'll spend a week outlining like, yeah, this isn't going anywhere. This isn't what I need to do. Or writer's block happens more in the outline, or like I don't know what the next chapter will need to be, and so I'll just sit there at that stage at the outline. So it's just all the same stuff still happens. It just happens at the stage before. So when I'm actually writing, a lot of those tangents I figured out weren't necessary in the outline. So then it quickens that up, but then the outline takes so much longer than it would to just do a quick outline and sit down. So it's still, you're gonna hit the same problems no matter what. I like outlining, so I prefer to
You hit them with a bit more
I
structure.
deal with them in that stage.
But one of the things that's always driven me to horror, whether it be video games, movies, books, is the inventiveness of the kills. Do you all find it difficult to off a character in a specific way, or do you look at something? Do you look at something? Do you look and say, how can I kill somebody with a pencil? And try to work that in.
You want to know how, or you want to try it? Nothing has been off the ticket since I started writing horror. Nothing at all. And as a matter of fact, it's nice to have a wife who 5 years ago had never watched a single horror movie ever. She's academic, comes from a family of academics. They didn't watch that kind of stuff. So for the past 5 years, it has been nothing but a deep dive force feed from The Shining all the way to Terrifier. And I can't get her to watch Terrifier 2, which means I'm watching 3 by myself tomorrow. She has actually come behind me before because she is always going to be my biggest fan. And she comes behind me a lot of the times as an editor and says, "You're holding back. You need to crank this up a little bit." And I've cranked it up so much that I actually got fired from a job before. So, nothing's off the table. Absolutely nothing. I mean, that's what cancel culture's for, right? They'll let us know.
But your question was, is it difficult to do? No, I mean, it's just whatever the story calls for. You go that route. Now, I don't know if I've ever sat down and thought I would need to kill somebody a certain way. It's just how the story comes, and then you just kill them with whatever's there. If there happens to be a pencil there, then yeah, we'll pick that thing up and jam it in there. But yeah, no, I think it's just fun. I think it needs to be a little organic.
For sure. I think that's part of it. Is I find it's more important to try and like limit the amount, because you have so many ways that you can kill someone that you think about like, okay, let's kind of rein it in a little bit, because otherwise it's like, oh, we can do this, we can do that, we can do this, we can do that, tear his guts out, rip his head off, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute, where are they right now? All right, they're in the boiler room. That calls for a certain type of mutilation, but not that one. Okay, so it really just depends.
So I had a. Did you want to go?
You can go first.
I was just going to say, so I wrote a book about a family that owns a restaurant in Little Italy, New York, and the mafia, and that was also splatterpunk as well. So I had a kill scene in the kitchen where I ran a female through the meat grinder.
Oh boy.
But
an appropriate one.
she deserved it. I mean, if you read the book, she was an evil woman, so she had it coming. So that was more on my mind. It's not so much how am I going to kill her. It's like, how do I justify killing her that evilly? And so, like I said, running her through the meat grinder wasn't the hard part. It was like, how do I make the readers read this and say, how the heck did he write that? But then I wrote her so bad that they're like, oh yeah, she had that coming. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm the same way to an extent. I think I focus more on, I try to make sure if I kill someone, it's done in a specific way, fitting to that exact character. For instance, I know one example that I've found when I watch movies, Hollow Man and the recent Invisible Man are two different takes on the Invisible Man genre. And not to give away the endings of the movies, but the one Hollow Man, I found, of the two, I think it's the weaker of the two. Hollow Man kills its main Invisible Man villain. I don't remember the exact one, but it's like he's electrocuted and like pushed off a balcony or something. And I remember
Elevator
thinking
shaft.
Yeah.
that's how you killed the
Yeah.
Invisible
Yeah.
Man, and just it's so random and unconnected to the character. Whereas the new Invisible Man, directed by Leigh Whannell, the way that Invisible Man's killed is 100% dedicated to who his character was in the film, and it matches so perfectly. And that's something that I've tried to do. For instance, Animal, the last act of the book is one extended slasher sequence, and there's about 6 different people that's killed in that final sequence, and I really focused on all the deaths were going to be creative, but I wanted them to match those specific characters. So just speaking vaguely, like the character who spent the whole book, nothing scares him, he's kind of a psycho, thinks everything's funny, he gets so afraid in the last act he takes his own life. The big character whose motto is never stop moving, something happens where he physically can't move. Things like that, you kill them in a way that matches their character so that it feels right, and it feels like, oh, this is how this character is always supposed to die.
That's a good point he makes, which is also, yeah, so to add to that, it's a lot of times, a lot of the kills, they have to, that like what you're talking about, that's a perfect way to put it, because it's, when you're killing them, you want to be able to reread the story and like it snaps. Oh,
Yeah.
What? Oh, I get it. Wow. That's our hope anyway. But yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah.
And you can also use it in a way the kill doesn't match their character at all to get the opposite effect. I know.
Like the irony.
Yeah, like for instance in The Departed, I won't say what it is, but there's a famous scene near the end of The Departed where a character that you think would get like a really reverent send-off is just
Marge.
boom, dead. And it's like, oh, I was wrong with that.
Yeah, wow.
But yeah, and that's tragic because it's not what you'd expect, but it's done really well. So it's not a case of like, oh, well, really the Invisible Man was pushed off a roof. It's, oh wow, this isn't how they were supposed to go, and now I feel sick because at leleast they didn't even get a death that
so
felt deserving. So
unceremoniously,
you got to know which one you're doing, and that's why I think the worst, because when you look at slasher movies, the worst slasher movies are just ones where it's the slasher stabs 10 different people in the same way, and it's like you really want the kills to be inventive and to match the pacing and everything of the book.
So, Jason Voorhees is one of my favorite slashers.
One of the most inventive.
Exactly.
All of it, yeah.
I mean, he'll take whatever's around him and he just uses it. That's the
Yeah.
one. And that's one of the things I love about him.
Voorhees.
Okay, thank you.
Michael's better.
I mean, this guy.
You think
My
so?
esteemed
I'll
colleagues
die.
failed to mention
Really?
Sleepaway Camp.
Halloween is far better than
Oh.
Friday.
Halloween came first, I'll grant you that.
That's for sure.
But there's
Really?
Halloween and Scream are way better than Friday the 13th.
Oh, I gotta get your socials, man. We gotta have
I guess I came to Friday the 13th late.
Oh, okay. All right. Really? Like even 5, 6? Really?
one of
I've watched 1, 3, the remake, and
Sleepaway Camp's good. I like
Oh,
Sleepaway Camp.
wait. Friday the 13th or Halloween?
I watched all the Halloweens. I watched
Okay, we're gonna have
not
to talk
all
about
of them.
this.
The 6th one, the 2nd of the remakes, and the most recent Halloweens are terrible. Aside
Okay,
from
all
that,
right.
I think overall Halloween is more consistent. I think
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Scream
Consistent.
is-
Absolutely. Way more consistent.
Scream
Yeah.
is the most consistent.
Well, it's funny though.
Yeah,
your
I
point,
agree
your
with that.
point just now was that you didn't like a slasher where the guy stabs 10 different people, and you just said Halloween's your favorite.
But Michael does it inventively. The one is on the wall, the one's...
But like you said, he hasn't
Still
seen all the Friday the
stabbing.
13th. Have you seen Jason SpaceX?
Well, the second
Where
one
Jason,
though
he
is
kills someone by freezing their face and shattering
I
their
actually
table.
prefer
I
Halloween
will
to
say
the Halloween.
the Friday the
Especially if you
13th
go
kills
now
are really
and
good.
watch Halloween.
Yeah.
I can understand why it was
And that's why I
cut
watch
out.
it. That's why I like it. I mean,
You watch
I'll
it
just
now and it stands
play
out.
devil's advocate.
There's a guy driving around your neighborhood in a car marked lunatic or asylum or whatever, and they never, bat an eye. It's a small town. It would not. That movie should have been 10
Looks like
minutes.
the Dope Cowboy.
I know,
Honestly,
and that's why people love it, and I get that. And of course, we're all tapping.
the
in.
Rob Zombie version. I'm gonna get under the table for this one.
Like, what's going on?
I prefer the Rob Zombie version of the original Halloween.
All right, now it's off the rails.
My writing, all of my writing, characters come first, and that's.
I'll tell you this.
You don't care who gets killed or who's what if you're not invested in those characters. And I write strong characters. I've been told this. I'm not bragging. I've been told this again and again and again and again. I write really strong characters, and I don't think that the original Halloween gives you enough of that character. I think Rob Zombie, in all his naughty goodness, like focused on Michael Myers as a child, and to me, oh, hell, I mean that was scarier than what you got to see in the original movie. Now the rest of the movie past the childhood thing, I could have done without. But that opening half hour, God, I love it.
I think if he would have released that as anything other than Halloween,
You could have
people
called
would
it.
love that
You could have,
movie.
and
But the fact that it's a Myers character, then you can look at it. But if it was a straight up slasher movie, everybody would celebrate it. It would be just like House of a Thousand Corpses.
Right.
It would be like that.
Lords of
But
Salem.
because it's a part of the franchise, it's just like the way nobody likes Friday the 13th, the remake, although I think it's a good
I thought it was
movie.
good.
I
I
do
did
too.
too.
But
It
if
was
you
great.
talk to
Yeah,
folks,
they
a lot of
married
them
all
don't like
together.
it because it's not what they're used to. But if that was a straight up slasher,
Or
everybody
Halloween
would
3.
love that. Halloween
Season of the
3.
Witch.
That's actually my
That's
favorite.
that's my favorite of the original franchise.
Wasn't Halloween supposed to have
Yes.
been an anthology?
An anthology
Yes,
series originally.
Carpenter wanted
Michael
it
was
that
supposed to
way,
be a
which is
one-off.
why he refused to do two, and they handed it off to the assistant director.
See, the interesting thing here is this is perfect, and a perfect example of what we were talking about, how some things affect other people differently than others. Like for this gentleman, that exposure to him as a child is what makes it more compelling. And like for myself, not knowing his motivations and not knowing why he is the way he is what's terrifying to me. Like watching the movie, you know, that not knowing that he had this childhood or this upbringing is what makes him so much more terrifying as an unrelenting, unstoppable killing machine. You know what I mean?
I mean, the point is, he's the boogeyman.
Yeah.
You can't be the boogeyman if we get to watch you grow up in that environment.
But I get what you're saying.
But
Like if it was
like
any
I
other
said,
movie,
any other thing else, yes. But the way
Yeah.
they tried to frame Michael, you can't tell us, you can't show us how the sausage.
Yeah, I don't want to know how he became the way he is. I just want to see that he is the way he is.
I'm a father of 5 and grandfather of 8. Kids scare me.
These movies have great jump scares and stuff. Do you find it hard to write a jump scare into a book?
Those are called
Tried.
typos.
Yeah. Have you ever done a jump scare in a book?
I don't think I have.
I don't think I have either. It just sort of happened, like it's something maybe we don't
Yeah,
mean for it
it
to,
might be
but
something that's specific to it. I mean, there's probably another term for it in writing, and we just don't.
Yeah, maybe.
think about
Getting
it.
our stuff
That's
from
true.
Ingram or Amazon or whatever, and we're flipping through it and like a page is blank, that's a jump scare.
Yeah.
Publishing has jump scares, writing does not.
I've attempted some jump scares in my book because I'm really a big fan of horror films, so I've tried to do it. You can't do it the same way because in film it's the quick flash and the
It's a
sound,
visual thing.
but you can, to an extent. The closest I've came is you can pivot really quickly in a way that shocks people. For instance, in Nightmare, there's a scene. The scene is completely normal. They're just coming home. Boom, boom, boom. Next sentence, there's a body hanging from the ceiling, and it's just that quick thing of oh
I guess
crap,
that would be equivalent, yeah.
or someone's or in
I
the
think we all have
slasher,
that.
they're just walking down the street, and then boom, there's mouth in their chest. If you skip the build up and go straight to the next action of oh this character's dead within one sentence,
Yeah.
you can kind of achieve a similar effect,
I
which
guess-
is
I hadn't
most
thought of
of
it
the
like
best
that.
parts of a
Yeah.
jump scare.
But
'Cause-
I'm guessing they're WTF scenes is what they would be called. in the
Yeah.
Yeah,
book.
probably.
They're not a jump scare. They're
Yes,
what-
those are fun to write.
Yeah. We all know that.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, the weakest part of a jump scare in a movie is typically the sound, because a lot of jump scares
Yeah.
will just boom sound, and that's what makes you jump. So you can get all the best parts of it in a book without relying on the weakness of just flashy noise that makes you move. It's the horror aspect that should make you jump.
Foley artists, I mean, oh god, here we go again. Shyamalan uses a lot of
What does that
off-screen.
mean? Some of us like some Shyamalan stuff.
A lot of people don't.
I don't like
I'm a
all of it.
shill.
I
I'm
like
a shill
some of it.
I'm a Shyamalan shill.
Shyamalan show.
I watched Watchers last week. I watched Trap last night.
I like that movie.
It wasn't too bad. But Shyamalan, especially in Signs, uses a lot of sound play, uses a lot of ambient, uses walking footsteps through the attic, whatever. And I think that scared the hell out of everybody more than the CGI alien in front of the TV where the Joker was supposed to swing away. And
Science, that's right.
yeah,
The Joker.
but those are some. There was another one that came out around the same time with Michael Keaton in it called White Noise.
Yeah.
That was
That
along
was
those
good.
along those same lines, and
That's super good.
that's where I started to kind of develop this thing where I'm like, man, I'm personally not scared of things that I see. I'm scared of feelings. I'm scared of noises. I'm scared of that's unsettling to me. You can show me something gross and disgusting all day long. It doesn't bother me. But if I can hear something and I don't know what it is, I can't identify it. Yeah, that bothers me. The Others was also another one with Nicole Kidman. That was
Okay, when you said like a silent jump scare, I thought of like Ari Aster movies like Hereditary and
Yes.
Midsummer. Hereditary is my favorite horror film, but it's like when you see when you see like the mom in the corner of the room and she kind of like floats
Yes.
away,
Yes.
and all you see is like the white, like her, but there's no, I don't think there's any sound, but it's like the most, to me, one of the most terrifying moments. And then
Doesn't
in
Conjuring do
Midsummer-
all stuff like that?
What happened?
The Conjuring, aren't they the kind of same way? They have a lot of those jump scares
Yeah,
with
I
things
think
right
so.
behind you and trying to reach out.
Oscar's-
They're very quiet.
Ari Aster's more of an art film guy though.
I didn't like it.
There's a cut of Midsummer out there that's like almost an hour longer. And over the summer they played it at Alamo. No, not Alamo because they closed during the summer. It was some theater here in Dallas, maybe the Angelica or something, and they did the like extended unrated director's cut of Midsummer, and I think it's out on Blu-ray, and they do sell DVD. You sell Blu-rays here, right? But yeah, can you? I mean, Midsummer, what it already is. Can you imagine adding an hour's worth of like character development and sorrow and
Right.
Florence Pugh?
And that goes back to your question about editing and what we should do with stories and stuff like that. And sometimes you don't need 9 hours and stuff. So, just saying.
Yeah.
I don't own it, but I'd like to see it at least once. Same thing with the Dr. Sleep film. There's a version out there that has like almost an hour back into it that actually makes it a better film.
That does happen. Kingdom of Heaven, same way.
Terminator 2,
Blade Runner.
Aliens,
Blade Runner.
Oh yeah.
Blade
Blade
Runner.
Runner.
Justice League.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wow, yeah.
The Snyder Cut.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rise of Skywalker. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Speaking of horror.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, you mentioned briefly like that 10 pages of it, and I think like that is part of like a big problem that Stephen King has with the role of women and girls in horror.
No, I don't know. Most of my books are strong female characters, and I know a ton of female writers that are in the, especially extreme horror. Candace Nola, Asher Dark just started. If you're on social media, you can find all of them there. If you follow me, I can send you recommendations and stuff. But yeah, of course, everything we do, we have to toe a line, and we want to represent. We're writing humans. We're writing, these are people in our stories, and even though it's fiction, we still want to be accurate, and we want to reflect certain things. But at the same time, it is fiction, and depending on when we put it, the reader needs to take into mind that too. You just have to kind of, I want to say we're playing with fire, but I'm just writing a book, so, and like I said, once you write it, it goes out there. I can't control what every single person wants to do. If they decide to go on some sort of weird witch hunt, like the person chasing him, you just have to deal with that as you deal with it. But I think if you write true, authentic characters that, then you shouldn't run into any of that kind of stuff. But you definitely want to represent different minorities and the LGBT community and women, especially. I think every writer should feel necessary. I think female writers have to do the same thing when they write men. We're all different. We need to be reflected properly. So.
19th century, a life expectancy was half what it is.
Right. I mean, just watch what is it, A Million Ways to Die in the West.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
explains the entire thing. So.
Completely different.
But yeah, it can be. But I think if you're a genuine person, and when you go to those things and you're in that zone yourself, I don't think you'll ever run into it. I mean, there are dirt bags in every industry. You will run across them in these and take advantage of certain situations and stuff. But as we move forward as a community, and that's the one cool thing about horror, especially in Florida, it is a community. We travel in packs. That's what I keep telling people. I've been to 5 events this year in different states, and every time, even if it's not a horror thing, I watch people walk up and go, I didn't know this was a horror event. I thought this was going to be fantasy, or I was like, it's because we travel as a pack and we will take over everything. Because we support each other. Men, women, everything. So
It is a very supportive community.
yes.
What was the initial, I want to make sure I'm answering the question. Can you ask one more time?
Yeah, just, are you conscious of, like, the way that you write women, and especially women and girls as victims, I guess?
Okay, yeah. So, as far as how I write females, most of my storytelling revolves around extremely strong female protagonists, much like him. So, yeah, I find that it's very enjoyable to write females, but like he was saying, you got to be honest about it, and definitely don't have like any agenda or anything like that. As long as you're just writing something that is true to reality. I certainly don't have any like, running through a forest, tripping on a log, and then like the monsters coming at you or something like that. All of my female characters are, like any human should be, capable and intelligent and capable of kicking ass when necessary. And if they die, they're going to go down swinging. As far as any sort of sexual anything, to be blunt, I do write some of that every once in a while in a story, but it's very, very fleeting, not because of any sort of like wanting to be conscious of anything. I just don't feel it's necessary for my stories to kind of like delve into it. So if I do, I'll usually allude to something that's romantic or intimate or anything like that, and let the audience decide what they want to extrapolate from that. That said, I'm just like, one of my biggest heroes is Jim Cameron. I don't know why he picked strong female protagonists for everything he does, but I certainly understand as someone who does it. I'm sure you do too. It's just, the story, I guess I just like writing strong women. I don't know. The next book is going to have a guy as the lead, and let's see how that goes. I hope he's smart. I don't know.
I think one interesting thing that you mentioned was Jim Cameron. I think the way I've always approached it is just, there are some books and some scenarios where like it would make a massive difference if it was female versus male main characters, but for the vast majority, at the end of the day, it's just people and their character arcs
Even
aren't
Ripley
necessarily
in
that's the
Alien.
thing. In the original version of Alien script, Ripley was a man, and I think it was halfway through they just decided to switch it. And when you look, it wasn't like there was a massive change of character, because they did it in the movie. There ended up being some themes of motherhood, especially with the central AI thing of the book, but overall, or the movie. But overall, like the reason Ripley works as a character, aside from Sigourney Weaver's acting, it wasn't specifically, Ripley's a female. It's just a well-written character, similar to even in, the second movie. I forget the Colonel's name, but the main character in the second movie, he was a good partner with Ripley, not because he was a male character, but just because the character was well written. So if the character's well written, that's it. Hicks. If the character's well written, for instance, the main character of the animal, it has a few, but the main one is Riley. I didn't email, and so this is just Riley is the character she is, and she can do what she can do as a person because of who she is, not necessarily the gender that she has. So
What about Rose? She could let Jack on the
she could have.
There's science that proves conclusively that it would have been unstable if she got on the boat or on the door.
Then there's Ray Skywalker.
Yeah. Oh boy.
I talked about that one story where I ran the female through the meat grinder, but I don't write them all that way.
But she deserved it.
She did deserve it. No, I actually wrote one book, and I actually wrote it for my daughters because They weren't really feeling my zombie series because that's that's kind of a guy thing. It was a bunch of Marines and cops, and it was kind of more of a. They weren't really feeling the zombie thing, so I wrote a book kind of hoping that they would read it. My teenage daughters, and it's a teenage female, and it's kind of a splatterpunk mixed with sci-fi. It's called Fester, and it was a little. It's very weird. But I had to depend on them a lot. Of course, I'm not a female or a teenager, so I had to depend on them a lot for seeking some insight into how to write that character. And her name is Hope, and I had a lot of fun writing that one. But yeah, I like writing. It's a challenge. I find it easier to write male characters just because I am one. But like I said, that was one of my more challenging books was Fester, just because trying to come from her point of view and her perspective, and to make the reader actually believe that I'm a teenage female. It was difficult, so I don't know if I would do it again, but I had a good time with it, though.
Another cool thing is that in indie horror, a lot of the editors that we use are female.
Yeah.
And so if we do go off and do something completely harebrained, they'll point it out here, right? They'll like that.
You get these calls where it's like, so.
You know, there's a lot of comments down the side of the.
No? Okay. Well, gentlemen, what we can do is they are selling their books here today. And what I'm asking you all to do is you can pick up whatever books you want to purchase. We've got customer service where you can purchase them and then bring them back and they'll personally sign them for you. Okay? There will be some of their books that will stay here in the store. So if you just can't afford it today and want to come back, I'll have them in our horror section here at this store. Won't be in any of the other stores, just ours, because we're the best.